So as I told that I will try to focus on one thing rather than running in 5 different paths. Uh, I should mainly focus on the product management side, but I think that I should complete this science literacy course at first because as I'm trying to not read anything from my textbooks and not learn from there but learn from the real life, and because the things in our textbooks are not very interesting or not anything of the practical life, so I need to figure out how can I learn science as I am not learning from there, and how can I use the science and etc. So the more important thing for me right now is to go through this science literacy course. So yeah, let's just start it. And yeah, I have gone through one video of this, and one thing that shook me very greatly is that in their video, let me show you. I don't own a car, so instead I use. And the course is like really well edited, well oriented, and well scripted. Uh, like the sound effects and everything. It doesn't feel like you are going through any boring course or boring video or boring anything. It like feels transit. Very energetic. We may not even have that. Let me 1 minute find the thing and then show it to you. Okay, this is the one line that like struck me hard. That like I love that line from the whole video, and I think I will greatly like this course from this one line. I understand, or I assume that. Okay, let's go through the line. As long as you ask questions that are answered with empirical observations that were collected systematically, you are a scientist. There is no such. So yes, you are a scientist. As long as you ask questions that are answered with empirical observations that were collected systematically, you are a scientist. So yeah, so you don't need a degree or anything to become a scientist. And let's go through the quiz. Okay, I need to need the internet to go into the quiz. Okay, every one of these things are of picture courses, so I need the internet connection, and it goes to the reading session. And this is the reading session. Let's create the menu and creating convincing arguments. Use systematically connected evidence. Let's say you have decided to write about reducing the cost of textbooks. You first have to decide who you need to convince. Is it right about reducing the cost of textbooks? We need to convince, since most of your fellow college students would agree with you on an issue like this. If you are going to make a difference, you would need to target a different audience, perhaps college administrators. You have to consider what language will work for your audience, what kind of evidence will what is that? Persuasive. I don't know. What will be persuasive, and how you can present that evidence in the most convincing manner possible. If you offend your audience members won't listen to what you have to say. While you may not be able to always convince your audience to see your side of an issue, you should at least be able to get them to listen to you and consider your points. What is this? Aristotle taught about 3 basic models of what is this word? This is a new word for me, so let's just go and discover dictionary. And also the fact that I have like factory resetted my phone, and then I haven't get into the dictionary, so this is also wanting the formats. Okay, let's take no for this. Do you allow to display the dictionary icon over other apps? No. Okay, save. Please enable show notification or show icon on the other app. Copy to search won't work. I don't need that. Why the heck are you making me fully like forcible to enable this thing? I don't want to. No. Do you want to continue with that? Okay. I haven't read the next one, so yes, I want to. And let's just use phone keyboard. Okay. Use built-in keyboard for use phone keyboard. Yeah, and just don't try this again. And also like when we are in this, let's set the app up for me. Okay, now it's set up. Then what was the sentence? Not the sentence, word. Persua. Not this. Persuasion. Pursue a. Not a. Okay, there is a. Okay, persuasion. Oh, what was pronunciation?
Persuasion. Persuasion.
Persuasion. Okay, I didn't get the sentence that much. Oh, though, whatever. Let's go with the thought that I have. Where am I? I started a basic model of perception. These models appear to human nature and continue to be used today in writing of all kinds, politics and what is this? Advertisements. Okay. A well-rounded, well-developed argument includes. Oh man, what are these things? Ethos, pathos, looks, looks credible and will maintain your audience attraction even if they don't agree. Ethos, supporting evidence. Build. What is this? Build. Man, I am really bad at reading. Build. So I think I just should go with this.
1. Ethos supporting evidence.
Power of
Build credibility by integrating anecdotes from those with specific experience or education.
this
Avoid logical fallacies, as they are not supported by scientific evidence, rather are.
power of Google. This is
1.
all.
Ethos supporting evidence. Build credibility by integrating anecdotes from those with specific experience or education. Avoid logical fallacies, as they are not supported by scientific evidence, rather are a product of fake science. Do not discuss the extremes, as these may hurt credibility if they are not representative of the problem. Use systematically collected evidence as it is least likely to be biased by emotions. And balance the pathos
Okay, my mom is talking too much and I am not being able to concentrate in the thing, and let's again try to concentrate. Avoid article faculties as they are not supported by certain typical evidence rather than product of fake science. Do not discuss the extremes as these may hurt credibility do not discourage the extremes. Okay, not the credibility. If they are not representative of the problem, use systematically collected evidence uh, as it is less likely to be biased by emotions, and balance the pathos, emotions, and logics. Pathos, emotions, appeal, appeal to emotions by considering all potential emotions people experience. Appeal to emotions by considering all potential emotions people experience. To be effective, use emotions most related to your topic. Sympathy for students' financial situation. Oh, yeah. Use credible. I think I just many times. Don't follow this one. No, not discuss the extremes. To be honest, I guess I'm going through the extremes many times. Like in any topic, if that is relevant enough or if that is logical enough, I just don't be normal and I just go to the extremes. I become extreme. I don't know, like if one thing is important, like why shouldn't we be extreme about that thing? Like extreme about having a solution of that thing. Something like that. I think that is logical to be extreme on something that is important. Maybe or maybe not, but yeah, I like go discuss the extremes later. Okay, that is advice for me to get it on, and let's see. I don't know, like why is this ball appearing here? Use credible verified examples to appeal to target emotions. Providing examples of students' real life financial stresses don't sound too emotional, maintain an even tone. Okay, logos present the logical con. What is this? Consequent. Man, I'm too bad at reading English. Conclusion. Ah, shit. Conclusion. Present the logical conclusion given the evidence discussed. Appeal to logic. Consider the audience perspective and build argument around what makes sense to audience. Present a clear line of reasoning. Avoid faulty logic. Avoid faulty logic. Clearly present research and if if appropriate personal experience to provide evidence. Science allows us to systematize our predictions, providing valuable evidence to support logical conclusions. When science is misused or uh, ex, exploited, I guess, or misunderstood, faculty logic consumes the argument. Uh, consumes. Is it consumes? And I'm too bad at pronouncing words. Which means we lose the trust and interest of our audience and fail to be persuasive in our arguments when forming arguments. It's especially important to use a what's this?
Science allows us to systematically test our predictions, providing valuable evidence to support logical conclusions. When science is misused or exploited or misunderstood, faulty logic consumes the argument, which means we lose the trust and interest of our audience and fail to be persuasive in our arguments. When forming arguments, it's especially important to use anecdotes to support our arguments and predictions. However, it is best to follow those anecdotes up with empirically collected scientific evidence that supports logical conclusions. This will help support a stronger, more convincing argument.
What is anecdotes? I don't know. In the following method and perception, whatever, you will build upon this reading to think about how to deconstruct convincing arguments, applications in being spectacle. This work, creating convincing arguments, is an derivative of argument and audience by exclusive online writing lab used under CC BY as licensed under CC by someone, and in this drag and drop activity you will need to sort the example into statements that are empirical and or logical. As always, have as many attempts as you would like. Good luck. I don't have an internet connection, so I want to go by myself. And let's see. 12 false. Absence make the heart grow fonder. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. What the hell is fonder? Let's see. I don't know, but I think maybe it's true or false. It's actions speak louder than words. Of course, true or false. Opposites attract. Yeah, opposite attracts. The pen is mightier than the sword. Yes. The early bird gets the worm. What is the worm? Maybe I know it, or maybe I not. Yes, that's the truth. Okay. Is there only one grade at which end of this module quiz? Okay, let's. How many graded quizzes are there? Okay, the end of the module quizzes are graded and other quizzes are not graded, so I'm not that much interested in the other quizzes, so I'm just only interested in the ends of the module quizzes, and I am right now acting like crazy and whatever. Being crazy is like not that much good or something, not that much bad or something like that, and I am really being crazy and I shouldn't be crazy. And what is this? This is also quiz. This is also practice quiz. I don't know why. The quiz will be graded once you're online. Okay. Bias. I have like read or listened in many videos about this in scientific things and biases and etc. But okay, I think I need to go through these things again. And right now I don't have any mood to like speak or read the things because I am like using my mouth for a long time now, so let's just make my Android do the work.
The trolley problem describes a thought experiment in which an individual, confronted with the critical situation of a trolley about to run over 5 people, must choose between the default and an alternative outcome that alters the path of the trolley and sacrifices its single driver to save the people on the tracks. Decision-making modes. Research on the underlying mechanisms of human moral decision-making and variations of the trolley dilemma shows that two distinct decision-making modes can alter the outcomes of people's decision processes significantly. 16. In a deliberate decision-making mode, in which people have time to think about and evaluate the problem, make more utilitarian moral decisions, saving the 5 people on the track. 16. On the other hand, in the alternative, intuitive decision-making mode, which is driven by emotions and easily accessible rules, the decisions people make are no longer moral, and instead put the trolley ahead of the people it could harm. Based on the availability of processing time, people shift between the two modes of using intuitive thinking versus analytical thinking. 16. Experiments show that in the presence of time pressure, people are systematically biased towards using the intuitive decision-making mode, often resulting in more catastrophic outcomes. 15. 23. This is why the environment and circumstances under which people face moral dilemmas can heavily influence those decisions' outcomes. The largest differences are likely to be observed between decisions in real-world actions, i.e., driver on the road, when there is limited time to think, versus hypothetical scenarios, i.e., taking a survey at home, when we have more time and resources to ensure our decision is appropriate.
Yeah, I get it. I don't know what these numbers mean. Okay, these are basically links of some other websites.
The underlying theory of bounded rationality postulates that people's decisions are biased by the cognitive.
Okay, I paused the video because I was sneezing and this cold is making me fully sick, and I really don't like this at all.
The underlying theory of bounded rationality postulates that people's decisions are biased by the cognitive limitations of their minds. 24, 25, resulting in being biased by the emotional proximity of the event or people in question. 26. In support of this theory, impersonal moral dilemmas are more likely to trigger analytical thinking, whereas personal dilemmas tend to result in more intuitive thinking to result in self-preserving behaviors. So we tend to rely on intuitive thinking when we have limited time to react. But many decisions we make allow for ample time to consider and think about the problem and any evidence that may support its solution. And therefore relying on biases and intuition is not a viable route for all of our decision making. And one thing that scientific evidence is generally protected against is bias. This work, Biases from Intuitive Thinking Can Guide Our Decision Making, is a derivative of Human Decision-Making Biases in the Moral Dilemmas of Autonomous Vehicles by Frank D.A. Chrysakou P., Mitkidis P., and Aurelie D., used under CC BY, is licensed under CC BY by Claire Scavuzzo.
Okay, bro.
It's difficult for anyone to be entirely objective, especially when we feel uncertain or if we lack understanding or information. Sometimes it's easier to rely on our instincts or our beliefs and let our expectations bias our observations.
Every one of us we're all influenced by cognitive biases, by emotion, by our desires.
I think biases are healthy in a way, as long as it's not the majority of who I am, my belief system. But, a few are good. And I think every human being has a bias of some sort,
I try not to be biased. I don't think I am, but who knows? Maybe other people think I am, but I don't think I am. And helping other people confront their own, I do the best I can because that's what I do as a helper for the Creator, as a teacher, as a knowledge keeper, as an elder. It's my place to help people. And if they have something that, that needs to be addressed, I will do it in a kind and gentle way. Like, I won't put anybody on the spot or, confront them in front of other people in that, but I will help them the best that I know how.
When thinking intuitively, we rely on heuristics or stereotypes, which allow us to make faster, knee-jerk decisions. Sometimes these instincts are correct. Sometimes they're not.
I published a study about 3 or 4 years ago in which I showed that people, when they're feeling highly uncertain, that they actually will engage in cognitive processing on a line that we call heuristic processing. So they won't really think about things, instead they'll rely more on their instincts or their gut feelings about something rather than actually deep contemplating about whatever the topic at hand is. Whereas in times of low uncertainty, when people feel less uncertain, they will process information on the line that we call elaborative thinking. So they're actually willing to elaborate on whatever information is available to them about the groups or the leaders.
The unfortunate news is fear works, right? And they've done a recent study on infectious disease on social media, and they found the ones that get the most pickup are the ones that use fear. To what degree is fear driving this? To what degree is a misperception of risk driving the decisions I'm making about myself and my family members?
When we lack understanding, we work with what is familiar to us. What's familiar to us, however, is biased by our past experiences and our current level of knowledge.
Just being exposed to...
Okay, I'm also thinking about one thing, that if I go through the courses like this and they won't have any right to copyright my videos or something. I don't know, like, if they would have the rights, and are these videos copyright free or not, I don't know. Let's just go.
Something. Just being exposed to information will make whatever that bit of information is seem more believable. It's called the mere exposure effect. A really good example is parents don't want their kids to commute, right? Because they're worried about their kid getting abducted, which is such a vanishingly rare occurrence that you can almost, from a scientific perspective, say it doesn't happen. But that is one of the driving motivations from stopping kids from commuting on their own to school. There'll be, one abduction, and it's probably someone who knows them. It's not a stranger. It's just so vivid for people, right?
Making decisions based on biases is problematic, as it can perpetuate intuitive thinking and cause us to improperly make predictions or modifications in the real world.
It's really, really hard, especially when it's become part of their identity, right? So whether it's how they view the GMOs or maybe it's how they view climate change, it becomes part of who they are. It is incredibly important to engage these topics. So, I think academics really need to get involved. There's really interesting research that shows that if you don't deploy critical thinking skills, every one of us can be overwhelmed by our own biases and our own ways that we misperceive the world. In my forthcoming book, I use active transport as an example of people's misperceptions. There's so many misperceptions around it, right? That it's more dangerous than driving, not true. That it takes longer to get places, and in general, it's faster. Like, they've actually done studies on that. Most Canadians, I think, drive it's like 27 minutes or something like that. But there are people who really are against it.
Scientists are not immune to biased or intuitive thinking, but they are trained to think analytically.
And it's so ironic because a lot of my research has actually been on conflicts of interest, and it's been on the social forces that spin science from the perspective of science, right? So I critique science like this, and I think this is one of the reasons that the scientific community is so frustrated by it. Like, let's look in the context of stem cells, an area that we've done a lot of research. You see people selling all these stem cell products that have no evidence behind them. You see clinicians selling stem cell therapies that have no good evidence to support their use.
In fact, the scientific process is designed as a safeguard against biases.
The public, and for the longest time, just really didn't believe in science. Like somehow they thought science was biased, tilted it one way. And I don't know if that's shifted now, where more and more of the public are starting to accept science.
Scientists are trained to ask questions and test predictions based on collection, analysis, and evaluation of systematically gathered evidence, or empirical observations.
There's been a number of really interesting studies, and one of them was published in Science just last year, that showed that lies and misinformation spreads faster than the truth. It doesn't surprise anyone. I bet you we could have guessed that outcome, but it's still good to have the data. And the authors of that study speculated that one of the reasons that happens is because, lies are more interesting, right? You can make it a lot more appealing, make it more controversial. And I think we need to learn from that. I think what we need to do with science is use some of the same tools that we've seen being used by celebrities and being used on social media. You can use narratives. You can use creative communication strategies. You can use art. You can use humor in order to get across the good science. And you're starting to see the SciComm world, the science communication world, doing exactly that, right? You're starting to see public health agencies doing exactly that. Yes, it's going to be difficult to compete with Katy Perry's Twitter feed with 100 million people, right? But we can try. And there's evidence that shows that these kind of strategies actually work.
Empirical observations differ from casual or anecdotal observations because they are defined, recorded, and measured systematically to challenge a prediction or hypothesis that has been posed. But even after empirical observations are made, a scientist may have a biased interpretation of the measures. This is because scientists sometimes have expectations based off their hypotheses, which may bias their interpretations to confirm their hypothesis. To avoid a biased interpretation, scientists include statistical methods to analyze and interpret the measurements, so that they can confidently use their observations to answer their question.
It's never going to be just more facts, more science. You've got to really engage the individual, listen to them, and use a variety of communication tools.
There are many types of bias, some of which can impair our ability to update our knowledge and our understanding. The preeminent confirmation bias is when we focus on evidence that supports or confirms our beliefs, while ignoring opposing evidence. Essentially, we see what we want to see.
For example, if we went to West Edmonton Mall, say a Friday afternoon, we'd probably see maybe 15,000 people. It's impossible to go and physically touch everybody. So you got to trust your eyes. But then if your eyes are telling you the sun's rising, it's an illusion. So how many other things are illusions? We just take them as being real.
For them, it's not a rational discourse. It's somehow they're against it aesthetically, they're against it ideologically, and therefore they find evidence to support them. It's a really good example of confirmation bias, right? So they have this ideological package that, for whatever reason, causes them to be against commuting, and they'll find evidence to back that up.
Because our beliefs are difficult to overwrite, even when we are told we are wrong, belief perseverance occurs when we stick to our initial belief despite opposing evidence.
For example, the concept of climate change. A lot of people just don't accept it. Even some world leaders don't accept it. So they're biased against it, even though the evidence is there. More and more evidence is there, accumulated every day about climate change. It's biased.
For those real hardcore conspiracy theorists, we'll call them that, it's probably almost near impossible to change their minds.
Hindsight 2020, or they say,
Hindsight bias is an after-the-fact understanding. You've probably heard the phrase, hindsight is 20/20, which suggests that it's easy to know what would have happened when you already know the outcome. This bias overestimates how well we can predict the future after it's already happened. It can only provide after-the-fact feedback about what would, could, or should have happened if things had been different.
Now that we know some common types of bias, do you see others around you, family, friends, teachers, celebrities, politicians, committing them on a regular basis? Would you consider yourself biased? And in what way?
Of course.
It's easy to recognize bias in others, but many of us seem to be blind to our own. This is called our bias blind spot, but a good scientist is aware of and can recognize their own biases.
Now, as much as we've been discussing the limitations of bias, it can be considered a good thing. When we acknowledge our biases, we scientists can integrate our bias with our scientific practice by using our biases as a source of testable hypothesis. If I, as a pedestrian, am biased against cars because I think they are loud and dangerous, I could simply hold my bias. Or I could be a scientist and actually test this bias by making systematic observations of environments with and without cars, defining measures of loudness and danger to pedestrians, and then statistically testing if there are differences in loudness and danger imposed on pedestrians in environments with and without cars. I can scientifically challenge my bias.
And what if you don't have the measurement tools or time at your disposal to collect such systematic observations? Easy. Look to the scientific literature, where your hypotheses may have already been tested. If you are able to find existing systematic evidence...
Oh man, my mom just turned on the fan in the other room, and I don't know if the audio would be listenable or not. I would just continue.
Evaluate it without bias to form your own tentative conclusion.
Which people are going to feel the most impact or most effect of climate change? It's the people living with the land, right? Both indigenous, non-indigenous. We see it. We can feel it. You know, we don't have to send out a team of scientists to come and study it. You know, they can study it, sure, but a lot of the times if they just ask us questions, you know, we provide answers for them.
Remember, science is a process. It doesn't have to be done at a lab bench, and it doesn't have to be related to any one specific topic. Simply put, science is an approach to evidence. Anyone can be a scientist if they are taking a systematic approach rather than a biased approach towards evidence. To avoid falling prey to confirmation bias or belief perseverance, keep an open mind and use critical thinking skills to evaluate evidence objectively. When we think analytically about the available evidence, we can correct and update our knowledge.
Really, those lines are just really, really great for anyone to know and anyone to understand. They would like really help anyone in their future or in their life. Drag and drop activity, you are going to match up the type of files with the correct definition. Oh man. Consider of its issue an example of its use and a solution to avoid its use. Yeah, but as many attempts as you want. Okay, I haven't learned the types of bias, but I have learned about the bias, but on the
Or if we lack understanding or information, sometimes it's easier to rely on...
We're all influenced by cognitive biases, by emotion, by our desires.
I think biases are healthy in a way, you know, as long as it's not the majority of who I am, you know, my belief system. But, you know, a few are good. And I think every human being has a bias of some sort, you know.
I try not to be biased. I don't think I am, but who knows? Maybe other people think I am, but it's my place to help people. And if they...
We rely on heuristics or stereotypes, which allow us to make faster, knee-jerk decisions. Sometimes these instincts are correct. Sometimes they're not.
I published a study about 3 or 4 years ago in which I showed that people, when they're feeling highly uncertain, that they actually will engage in cognitive processing on a line that we call here.
The unfortunate news is fear works, right? And they've done a recent study on infectious disease on social media, and they found the ones that get the most pickup are the ones that use fear. To what degree is fear driving this? To what degree is a misperception of risk driving the decisions I'm making about myself? A really good example is when parents don't want their kids to commute, right? Because they're worried about their kid getting abducted, which is such a vanishingly rare occurrence that you can almost from a scientific perspective say it doesn't happen. But that is what...
Making decisions based on biases is problematic, as it can perpetuate intuitive thinking and cause us to improperly make predictions.
There's really interesting research that shows that if you don't deploy critical thinking skills, we can... Active transport is an example of people's misperceptions. There's so many misperceptions around it, right? You know, that it's so ironic because a lot of my research has actually been on conflicts of interest, and it's been on...
The public, and for the longest time, just really didn't believe in science.
It's still good to have the data. And the authors of that study speculated that one of the reasons that happens is because, hey, science, lies are more interesting, right?
To avoid a biased interpretation, scientists include statistical methods to analyze and interpret the measurements, so that they can confidently use their observations to answer their question.
It's never going to be just more facts, more science. You've got to really engage the individual, listen to them, and use a variety of communication.
The preeminent confirmation bias is when we focus on evidence that supports or confirms our belief. There are many types of bias, some of which can impair our ability to update our knowledge and our understanding. The preeminent confirmation bias is when we focus on evidence that supports or confirms our beliefs, while ignoring opposing evidence. Essentially, we see what we want to see.
For example, if we went to West Edmonton Mall, say a Friday afternoon, we'd probably see maybe 15,000 people. It's impossible to go and physically touch everybody. So you got to trust your eyes. But then if your eyes are telling you the sun's rising, it's an illusion. You know, so how many other things are illusions? We just take them as being real.
For them, it's not a rational discourse. It's somehow they're against it aesthetically, they're against it ideologically, and therefore they find evidence to support them. It's a really good example of confirmation bias, right? So they have this ideological package that, for whatever reason, causes them to be against commuting, and they'll find evidence to back that up.
Because our beliefs are difficult to overwrite, even when we are told we are wrong, belief perseverance occurs when we stick to our initial belief despite opposing evidence.
For example, the concept of climate change. A lot of people just don't accept it, even some world leaders don't accept it. So they're biased against it, even though the evidence is there. More and more evidence is there, accumulated every day about climate change. You know, it's biased.
For those real hardcore conspiracy theorists, we'll call them that, it's probably almost near impossible to change their minds.
Hindsight 2020, or they say, you know.
Hindsight bias is an after-the-fact understanding. You've probably heard the phrase, hindsight is 2020, which suggests that it's easy to know what would have happened when you already know the outcome.
It's probably almost near impossible to change their minds.
Hindsight 2020, or they say, you know.
Hindsight bias is an after-the-fact understanding. You've probably heard the phrase, hindsight is 2020, which suggests that it's easy to know what would have happened when you already know the outcome. This bias overestimates how well we can predict the future after it's already happened. It can only provide after-the-fact feedback about what would, could, or should have happened if things had been different.
Now that we know some common types of bias, do you see others around you? Family, friends?
That's okay. One is confirmation, one is belief, and one is I forgot. Let's go to that again.
Based off their hypotheses.
Make it more controversial.
Illusion.
Hypothesis
People,
bias.
it's impossible to go and physically touch everybody. So you got to trust your eyes. But then if
Belief person. This bias overestimates how well we can predict the future after it's already happened.
Yeah. Hindsight bias. Hindsight bias. Okay, I got it. I understand all the things. In this reading, you will learn the answer to a very spark. What is this? Shakespeare's I don't know. Problem, science or not science, that is the question. I don't know, I need internet for that.
Since moving to Alberta and having young kids, I've learned so much about dinosaurs. It helps having my lab space down the hall from famous paleontologist Dr. Phil Curry and paleobotanist Dr. Eva Koppelhaus. Walking around the U Alberta campus, you can't ignore the numerous pieces of scientific evidence collected to build theories that increase our understanding and knowledge of prehistoric life and ecosystems. I guess what's left me dissatisfied with these theories is that by being related to prehistoric life, there is no way to prove the theories, nor is there any way to disprove them. We can't, for example, time travel back to confirm Phil Curry's famous theory that tyrannosaurs were social creatures.
Hey now, be careful what you say. In science, there is no such thing as just a theory. A theory isn't just a guess. It is a general explanation of the available scientific evidence. To be considered a scientific theory, they must be based on an accumulation of scientific evidence. So, theories are created from multiple pieces of evidence and can't be based on a single event or observation. For example, Phil Curry's theory of social interactions between tyrannosaurs is supported by a body of evidence, not just a single observation or event. Scientific theories package scientific evidence or systematic observations into an easy-to-understand explanation.
A good theory will account for all the evidence available, not just the evidence that supports it. A theory that is just based on confirmatory evidence and that ignores refuting evidence would be considered biased and would not be considered scientifically useful for generating predictions. So a biased theory is not just a theory, it's an opinion, because it's not accounting for all of the available evidence.
A good theory will create good hypotheses. When we have a cohesive story that explains all of the available evidence, then we can make predictions or hypotheses about future observations or related phenomena. Scientists aim to build theories based off systematically collected evidence. But what guides the collection of evidence is the generation of hypotheses. Because a theory is only as strong as the evidence that supports it, to weaken a theory, we need evidence that disproves it. Strong theories can withstand disproof. In science, hypotheses are predictions that are generated to test a theory and, in effect, disprove a theory. Based on the trackways discovered by other paleontologists, let's look at Curry's theory that tyrannosaurs were social. If I want to disprove Dr. Curry's theory about the social nature of tyrannosaurs, I can't just call it just a theory to weaken it. I need to generate hypotheses to disprove it.
The beauty of the process of science is that theory building is a dialogue of evidence and systematic observations, because a theory explains multiple pieces of evidence and cannot be based on a single event or observation. So even though the theory, as we have discussed it, rests on this single trackway site of 3 tyrannosaurs walking in the same direction, there are multiple other observations that also support this theory, like tyrannosaur bone beds that contain the remains of many individuals of mixed ages, suggesting that they died and possibly lived together in larger groups, and that many social behaviors may have been common in tyrannosaurs, like the famous T-Rex.
It is important to note that there is no threshold for evidence to support a theory. No amount of evidence will ever be sufficient to prove a theory. In science, we don't talk about evidence as proof or fact. Evidence may support or refute a theory, and based on the evidence available, we can evaluate it to update, reject, or accept a theory. The accumulation of evidence that aligns to tell the same story and absence of refuting evidence to disprove it would give us an increased confidence in the accuracy of the theory.
Theories are more than just guesses. They are a general explanation of the available evidence. Therefore, a theory can be overturned based off new evidence, because a theory is built based off a body of evidence. Multiple observations stemming from multiple tests of different hypotheses are needed to form a theory. A theory cannot be based on a single event or observation. It must be based on multiple observations. A strong theory has no evidence against it, but a strong theory will never be proven because there is no threshold of evidence needed to prove a theory. So, we accept theories until we see evidence against them. This is why it is so important for scientists to keep an open mind towards new observations, as they may be useful to support or refute theories or general explanations of accumulated knowledge in the field.
Like this thing is really great that in this course I am directly getting like science should be explained, like how the science is working and how it is working at, but in our textbooks we are just taught that these things work in this way, this thing works in this way, this is the scientific evidence for this, and this is the evidence for this, and this is the this for etc. Many times they don't even show the evidence or anything, they just goes and tells that this is this, this is this, this is this, and like in biology we just go through this is this, this is this, this is this. We just go through why is this, how is this, or anything like that, and how did they like came into this conclusion that this is in this way or anything. And in like chemistry or anything also we just go through like that. In physics also, in physics, to be honest, these physics only have the most like practical things comparing to other scientific places, but before science like or reading about physics or anything, we should be taught how the science is working, how it is going in, etc. We should be explained what is theory and etc. But our schools doesn't does that, and that's why I hate school. In this reading you will learn about all about the big picture questions by looking about what is this metaphysical thought. Make sure you complete the reading before attempting the next drag and drop activity. Okay, I'm not going to drag and drop, and I'm not going to read. Acknowledgement. Okay, I will see the acknowledgement later. Not right now. I think it's enough for right now, and I want to get up and get out and do something else because from quite a few hours. I was just directly recording one after one thing, and going into one after one thing, like gone through the conundrums, then this science literacy, and now I think I should take a break. Okay.